Welcome to this edition of Under the Radar for Saturday, May 20th. And this week, I want to follow on from the theme of my last video of the intolerance of enlightened academics like Miss Chu, Dean of Pearson College at Yale University, currently now on leave. But I think today's miscreant is in a whole other class to Miss Chu. Hawaii professor demands that colleges stop hiring white cis men.
You're fucking a white male!
A University of Hawaii professor recently claimed that universities should stop hiring white cis men until the problem goes away. In a recent American Mathematical Society blog post unsubtly titled, "Get Out of the Way," University of Hawaii at Manoa temporary assistant professor of mathematics Piper Heron argues that white cisgender males should immediately resign from their positions because actual solutions require women of colour and trans people. Yeah, because women of colour and trans people have been responsible for all those inventions and innovations over time that have moved our civilization forward. Yes. Now let's just dispense with the obvious double standard that would apply if the races and genders were reversed, because the equality of outcome ideologues have no sense of what it means to apply a principle in a consistent manner. You only apply it when it suits your ideology. Anyway, let's go to the source and have a look at this blog post. Not to alarm you, but I probably want you to quit your job, or at least take a demotion. Statistically speaking, you're probably taking up room that should go to someone else. If you're a white cis man, meaning you identify as male and you were assigned male at birth, you almost certainly should resign from your position of power. That's right, please quit. Too difficult? Well, as a first step, at least get off your hiring committee, your curriculum committee, and make sure you're replaced by a woman of colour or trans person. Don't have any in your department? How shocking. Unless you think that white women get a pass from this bigot, think again. Right now I want to talk about gender equality because the fact that women aren't actually a demographic minority makes certain arguments easier. But please know that actual solutions require women of colour and trans people. Remember, having white cis women run the world is no kind of solution. Sorry, white girls. Now this goes on in an incoherent ramble asserting all kinds of nonsense, but not once backing it up with any empirical evidence. Just check out this gem. If you're on a hiring committee and you're looking at applicants and you see a stellar white male applicant, think long and hard about whether your department needs another white man. You're not hiring a researching robot who will output papers from a dark closet. You're hiring an educator, a role model, a spokesperson, an advisor, a committee person. When you hire a non-marginalised person, you are just supporting this one applicant whom you like. You're rewarding a person who's been rewarded his whole life. Wow, she doesn't sound bitter at all, does she? You are just satisfying the system that makes his application look so good. You are not innocent. You are perpetuating a system that requires your participation, if not your consent. When your female students of colour have no role models in your department, that's not meritocracy. That's on you. I'm sick of this role model crap. You don't need role models to have the exact same skin colour as you. Males can have female role models. Females can have male role models. Do white kids stop playing basketball because they don't see many people like themselves on the court? And by the way, why would these kids want to be academics, particularly academics like you? Again, if you think the great mathematicians are disproportionately male because of meritocracy, then your sexism is showing. No, it's because men are overrepresented at the high end of the IQ spectrum, and IQ is a good predictor of mathematical ability, just as it's a good predictor of chess playing ability. But hey, don't take my word for it. Listen to Lena Cronin, someone that's spent a good deal of her life studying sex differences.
For all sex differences in all species, this is not just humans, all sex differences in all species, there's a difference in the shape of the tails. Among males, the variance, that's the difference between the best and the worst, and the most and the least, or whatever it is, tallest and shortest, is far greater than among females. Females tend to cluster round the mean, that curve there in the middle. Females tend to cluster around the mean. The tails are far less far apart, but among males, the variance can be great, huge. So males are almost bound to be overrepresented, both at the bottom and at the top. I think of this, I hasten to say metaphorically, as more dumbbells, but more Nobels. An extreme example of the right-hand tail, which even the scientist who found it said in the paper staggering, for the ability in mechanical reasoning in the top 0.1%, that's admittedly a very rarefied atmosphere. Try and guess what the male-female ratio is. It's 236 to 1. That's how far the Nobel's dumbbells effect can push the difference between males and females. Now, greater male variance, as you can see in that extreme example, can profoundly influence male-female differences, particularly those that most enrage conventional wisdom, that is, the predominance of men at the top, always looking to the top, never at the dumbbells.
Also, even women that do have high mathematical ability tend not to go into STEM fields at the same rate as men. But of course, choice can never be a factor for the gender ideologues. It must be some form of oppression.
What's more, it's been found that a person's interests are the most powerful predictor of what their entire career will be like, even more so, surprisingly, than talent. So, look at females in the UK professions. From over 80% in the people-oriented down to 6% in things-oriented. Well, ghettoization, really? Or might it not be choice? By the way, even those 6% female engineers are overwhelmingly in bioengineering, that is, working with people or other living things. And even women in the top 1% of mathematical ability, 1%, that's very, very high, choose instead, unlike their male counterparts, they often choose careers working with people, again, people and living things, biosciences, doctors, and so on. And yet, the conventional wisdom stubbornly refuses to acknowledge that women's own interests might be a cause of how they choose their of what careers they're in.
Obviously, Cronin has a bad case of internalised misogyny. Now, just as batshit crazy as that blog post is one of the comments down below from a one Diane Jackson. We need to decouple success in mathematics from IQ. IQ is a social construct that cishet white men devise that defines intelligence on the basis of culture. Sadly, there is a direct correlation between high IQ and earning a PhD in a STEM discipline. I would say, thankfully, which is all too reflective of how white cishet men have designed disciplinary concepts to reinforce their own power structures. It is fundamentally unfair and marginalising for IQ tests and mathematics curriculum to be designed around the same white supremacist, cis heteronormative standards, thus marginalising women of colour. What we need isn't just fair hiring, we need a radical reconceptualisation of mathematics in a decolonising framework. So there you go, mathematics needs to be decolonised. But Diane is really behind the eight ball when it comes to decolonisation. Because as you may have seen last year, there's a group of geniuses at Cape Town University that think science in its entirety needs to be decolonised.
But I was actually thinking about this coming here because I thought that it was going to be one of the coming questions. How do we even start to decolonize science? Because science is true because it is science. And, what can you do? And my response to that was, if I personally were committed to enforcing decolonization, science as a whole is a product of Western modernity, and the whole thing should be scratched off, especially in Africa. So if you want practical solutions to how to decolonize science, we'd have to restart science from, an African perspective, from our perspective of how we've experienced science.
Decolonise science because colonialism. But back to Piper Heron. Let's check out her bio on the American Mathematical Society blog, Inclusion Exclusion. Piper Heron tried really hard to play by the rules of society and academia, but she failed. Not only did she fail, but she was miserable and found that playing by the rules wouldn't even keep her safe. After giving up completely and after giving birth to her second child, she finally finished the first draft of her number theory PhD thesis in 2014, a mere 6 years late. She dedicates her work to everyone who dabbles in misery, trying to find their way in systems that don't support them, and to anyone trying to tear it all down. So not only is she unbelievably bigoted, but she's incompetent as well. And that's always a good starting point to build resentment against meritocracy so you can replace it with mediocre people like yourself. Now remember, this is the mathematics field, so let's check out a few more bios of those on the American Mathematics Society Inclusion-Exclusion blog. How about the editor-in-chief, Adriana Salerno? She's also very interested in the communication and teaching of mathematics to create a more inclusive and diverse STEM workforce. She is an alum of the Linton Poudry Sackner's Summer Leadership Institute and is committed to increasing the representation of minorities and women in the mathematical sciences. So, another equality fascist. Great. How about Brian Katz? For Brian, all teaching is political and hence should be about justice. This perspective leads to his passion for teaching with inquiry because he sees it as a tool to address or remove barriers coming from previous experiences, to teach students to trust their own authority and respect the ideas of peers, and to reconstruct our narratives of the discipline. Well, that's just a long-winded way of saying my feelings are important. How about Luis Leiva? His research rests at the juncture of mathematics education, higher education, and gender studies to document the intersectionality of lived experiences among marginalized student populations, including African Americans, Latinas, and members of the LGBT alphabet community, in navigating undergraduate STEM education as a gendered, racialized, and heteronormative space. His research aims to increase academically supportive and socially affirming STEM learning opportunities across educational spaces, including undergraduate classrooms and STEM support programs that attend to the intersectionality of marginalized student experiences. And I think one of his other hobbies is including as many buzzwords as he can in one paragraph. So you think the hard sciences are immune from social justice bullshit? Think again. Now, I'm not saying this blog is representative of thinking in the field of mathematics, but we should be aware that social justice is metastasizing like an out-of-control tumor, attempting to insinuate itself in all aspects of academia. Now, you might remember I reported on Melbourne University about a year ago that they advertised female-only jobs in a bid to remedy gender imbalance in mathematics. The great sin committed by Melbourne University was that only 19% of their mathematics staff were female, as opposed to 25% nationwide.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's only fitting that I go out with another pleasant story of white male bashing from the University of Melbourne. Uni holds workshops on male privilege. Oh, you know this will be good. Privileged male students have been told to be more like women by curbing their confidence and refraining from dominating or showing off during classes, following workshops run by the University of Melbourne Student Union. Men should also acknowledge that being born male and white affords them certain privileges and reconsider the use of Australian banter during tutorials because of the risks of excluding students from other cultural backgrounds. And that's right. As a white male at university, you need to acknowledge that you're less likely to be there in the first place, that you'll do worse at school, that you'll live a shorter life, that you're more likely to die from any type of unisex cancer, more likely to be a victim of violent crime, more likely to commit suicide, more likely to die in a work-related accident, in war, and not see your children in the event of a divorce. And on the subject of Australian banter, in my experience, and I do have extensive experience with this, one of the most enjoyable parts of learning a foreign language is the colloquialisms, like the different slang used in different parts of the country. It's actually a good way to ensure successful integration. But of course, the social justice warriors want us all to occupy cultural enclaves that don't speak to one another and then claim multicultural success. A report from the sessions tabled with the Union Student Council reveals female and coloured students' complaints about gaslighting, a term commonly used to describe how victims of domestic violence are manipulated by perpetrators, describing how white male students talk over them in class, making us question whether we know anything. Well, that's part of being at university, isn't it? To question things, to challenge your own assumptions. No, you're thinking of a university. This is a safe space. Ways for men not to dominate tutorials, acknowledging the race and gender problem in order to fix it. I'd say if you're the one bringing up race and gender, you're the one with the problem. Questioning yourself when you want to speak in a tutorial as to why you want to speak. Is it to self-aggrandize or to learn and contribute? The report also advises female students against the tendency of some women to cushion opinions with qualifying statements like, "This is probably stupid, but..." Women should stop second-guessing their intelligence, it says. Well, that's probably a worthwhile piece of advice. But men should learn how to speak like women and not speak with absolute confidence when they're in fact not sure or expressing an opinion. You're not expressing yourself in the way that we want you to express yourself. And remember, we're for diversity. Sure, it's a good idea to think through what you say before you say it and make the appropriate caveats if necessary, but sometimes you learn not to be overconfident by making the mistake of being too confident. That's how we learn. And can we stop with the presumption that all men talk like that and all women are timid children that can't express themselves? Can you imagine how utterly boring and non-diverse the world of the diversity ideologues would be if they got their way? Their version of diversity is conformity. They want everybody to think and sound the same as them. Now, if you're a male being subjected to this horseshit on campus, stand up and tell these fascist scumbags to take a long walk off a short pier. And I don't think women are this pathetic. I think it's a small number of gender ideologues. But if women are this utterly hopeless, then I suggest we segregate the universities and the women can go into their safe space, talk about their feelings and their lived experiences, and the men can go off and learn the subject matter. And since we're on the topic of safe spaces, perhaps that's a good way to end with a quote from Brendan O'Neill, who was reportedly advising students at Bristol University to go into a safe space and fuck it up. I couldn't agree more. So what do you think? Is it time to put all white males on a reservation and decolonize science? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.